Hello, this is Rick Jordan, the Church Resources Coordinator for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of North Carolina. We welcome you to this webinar on The Sun is Up, One Minister's Awakening to Racial Reconciliation. Our presenter today is Martha Kearse. As of April 2018, Martha has been the pastor of Peakland Baptist Church in Lynchburg, Virginia. Before that, she served on the ministerial staff of St. John's Baptist in Charlotte from 2001 to 2018. Martha received her MDiv in Pastoral Studies from the School of Divinity at Gardner-Webb University in 2007, where she was a CBF Leadership Scholar. She was ordained by St. John's Baptist Church in Charlotte that same year. In 2017, Martha completed her Doctor of Ministry degree at Gardner-Webb University, writing her doctoral paper on racial reconciliation and the theology of hospitality. Today's webinar will begin with Martha's presentation. If you have questions or comments, you may enter them in the question box at any time. You can scroll down to the bottom of your screen. You'll see a box and it says Q&A. You can enter those in at any time during the presentation. Thank you for your participation in today's webinar. And just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded and will be stored in the CBF of North Carolina Virtual Resource Library on our website. Martha, we welcome you.
Thank you. It's really great to be with you. I appreciate being invited to be part of this webinar series.
Well,
glad to be with you.
Yeah, we appreciate your being with us. And I know you've got a formal presentation that you're going to be giving us, but before you begin that, can you tell us a little bit about how you became interested in this subject?
Right. Well, being in ministry was not my first career. I was a high school English teacher in Charlotte from 1985 to 1997, I think. Yeah, that's right. And you know, during that time, I'm working with a very diverse faculty, diverse in all kinds of ways, diverse in terms of race and in age and in gender and all of that, as well as the student body. But one of the things that rose up while I was teaching was the issue of the different opportunities for white students and Black students. My growing awareness in the second school where I worked of Black students feeling unwelcome. And in saying that, I don't want to attribute to anybody any intentionality in making them feel unwelcome, so much as I want to point out that they felt unwelcome. They were expressing to me that, for example, it was the first time I heard about students being pulled for being Black. They would say that they would come over for school events and get pulled over by the police on their way into school. So one of the things when I started as a minister was my sense of, well, maybe I can be part of something good, working with African-American churches and partnering. And that didn't work. The attempts that I thought I was making were real failures, and I didn't understand why they didn't work. So when I was doing my doctoral work and thinking about what my project would be, I was also doing some things with Baptist Peace Fellowship and with a local organization there in Charlotte that came up while I was there, a clergy organization there in Charlotte. And this rose to I would say I was called to it. I would say it was presented to me by God as this is what you should do. And so my doctoral work was about biblical hospitality as it's related to race and how we might be applying it to these issues in our culture. And then when I completed that, it seemed like the next thing that needed to happen was for me to share this more broadly. So the book came out of that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing part of your story with us. And yeah, we look forward now to your more formal presentation, if you will.
Great. Well, I'll say here at first that as a former teacher, I love interaction. So those of you out here participating, I'm so glad that you're willing to give this time. And as we go, please feel free to send the questions out and interact. Even make comments or observations. Please feel free to do that. So I'll tell you very quickly, the title of the book and the title of the presentation is The Sun is Up. That comes out of something that my son used to do. My son, who is 24 now and 6'5", as a toddler, he was the first one up every morning, usually very, 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 very early. And his practice was to come to my bed and put his face right next to mine until I would startle awake. And then he would look at me and he would say, "The sun is up." And what he meant by that was, it is way past time for you to be up and fixing my breakfast and taking care of these things that I need you to do. And when I was thinking about where we are, to me, that kind of summed it up. That when we think about race in America, the term race is even inaccurate itself. When we think about this, waking up is long past what we should be doing. The sun is up, it has been up. And so that's kind of the starting place for this. So what I'd like to do is start with some things about where I'm founding this in theology, the stones on which I want to build this. So starting out with talking about biblical hospitality, I even want to go back a little further and make sure everybody's real clear what I mean when I say biblical hospitality is good theology. So, it's basically using the Wesleyan quadrilateral to define good theology. Good theology is a theology based on pervasive themes of the Bible. So good theology is not a line or a story. Good theology is something that can be shown many places in the Bible. Good theology holds up to the lived experience of the church, and not just American or European churches, but it holds up worldwide. It holds up across cultures. Good theology keeps close to common sense. It does not counteract individual human lived experience. Good theology is in keeping, for me, with my experience of God. So I always want to be clear that it's my book, it's my presentation, this is my theology. I don't pretend to speak for anyone else. So biblical hospitality, when I went looking for it, and the way I went looking for it was I started with the Greek and Hebrew words for stranger or alien. And I found something like 140 instances of the use of that word. And so in reading passages that use that word, alien or stranger, what I came up with was certain categories where this word is used. And that's how I went about defining biblical hospitality. So biblical hospitality begins with Psalm 24. And the idea that none of this, our bodies, our world, our cars, our houses, our 401ks, none of this belongs to us. It all belongs to God. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwell therein. So the core of hospitality is we are living on borrowed land. It doesn't belong to us. We're just living here. And we've been given the grace to live here by God. So I think that that starting place, that it isn't ours, is something, first of all, that we miss all the time. I miss all the time. And second of all, that it grounds us in something that then now we can talk about further. So if it isn't ours, well, now I think we're talking about something different. We're not talking about, you know, us being generous with our stuff. We're talking about it wasn't ours to begin with. Hospitality, biblical hospitality, is about genuine welcome. Many, many stories of someone being genuinely happy for a stranger to be welcomed into their home, pulling out the fatted calf for the stranger, preparing the meal, washing the feet, anointing with oil, welcoming someone who is an outsider. So that is another consistent element. This is one that we don't talk about almost at all. But biblical hospitality includes protection. The idea is once you're in my space, once you've crossed my threshold, now it's my job to make sure you're safe. If I don't do that, I have broken hospitality with you. So when you think about the story of Lot in Sodom, and picture him standing at the door, leaning against that door, to keep the outsiders out, ready to sacrifice his daughters lest his guests be harmed. That is biblical hospitality. These are guests, and I will do anything in my power to make sure that they are safe. Just the status as guests gets them my protection. Countless examples of God saying, I, God, love foreigners. I love outsiders. I love the stranger. I love the alien. Those people matter to me. They're sacred people. And, you know, the New Testament, Matthew 25 passage calls them the least of these. There's all kinds of names for them: stranger, alien, outsider, foreigner, least of these, call them what you will. They're the people without status. They're the people without power. They're the people who aren't technically citizens. Those are the people for whom God expresses love, not to the exclusion of the insiders, not that the insiders are not also loved. I mean, see the parable of the two sons for that. One son goes away, one son stays. Father loves them both. It's all yours. It was always all yours. So the fact that God loves these people and that their status is the same in terms of God's eyes, powerful part of biblical hospitality. And here's the reason to offer hospitality. It's sometimes even expressed as an if-then clause, or a because therefore. It's both of those are expressed. Because you were saved, because God rescued you, therefore you're expected to rescue these outsiders. One-to-one correspondence. This happened, therefore you're called to this. So biblical hospitality is all of those things. So in thinking about the issues of race in our culture and how to approach them, to me it seemed like using biblical hospitality was a great way in. First of all, the word hospitality is not one where people's hackles immediately go up. People expect to be hospitable. Churches expect to be hospitable. Something to think about is drive around in your area and look at the church signs and notice how many of them say all people are welcome. All are welcome here, or you are welcome here. Churches think of themselves as hospitable. Now, I've driven past many churches, especially Baptist churches, that say, you are welcome here. And I've thought, probably not. Probably you would not welcome me. You would not like what I think and what I believe, and I would not be welcome. But I mean, good for you that you're at least trying. So hospitality is something we think we should be doing. It's not threatening, it's familiar, and it's not controversial. To say we should be offering hospitality is something, most people would agree with. To use biblical hospitality is to invoke the authority of the Bible, the validity of the Bible. And for me as a minister, it's fair game. I always feel like I'm not interested in politics. I have nothing to say about politicians, but I can talk about the Bible all day long. That is my purview. I'm allowed, if it's in there, I'm allowed to talk about it. So if I want to have a sermon about talking donkeys and dragons, I can do that because it's in the Bible. If I want to talk about wealth, I can do that because Jesus did. And if I want to talk about the difficult things that hospitality calls us to, I can do that because the Bible is full of it. So that's our starting place. So as we continue talking, we're going to get to a place where I'm going to ask you to think about the other stories, the other passages you know of where biblical hospitality is invoked, stories about what happens when it's broken, stories about what's happened when it's offered or how it's offered. So please feel free to offer examples as we go along. The book, The Sun Is Up, I used one passage as a focus. And again, I regard this not as cherry picking. It's an example. It is one passage among many, 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 many passages. And I can send, by the way, a list of passages to talk about. But this covers a lot of that territory. So this is Leviticus 19:33 through 34, which you're probably familiar with. When an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So we're going to break that down just a little bit. So the first part, when an alien resides with you in your land. This word alien, the most common Hebrew word that is translated either alien or foreigner or stranger in the Old Testament is the English version of it is ger. Hebrew, this Hebrew word that connotes an outsider, a person who's not born in the culture but has moved into the land and lives around you. So the who of this passage is the outsider, the alien. This is who we're talking about. You, the you being, the plural you being invoked here is you're the insiders. You're the ones who are part of this, and you get all the citizenship rights. So this is the alien. When they live with you, that's who we're talking about. You, the insider, shall not oppress the alien. So yana, oppress, is to do wrong to or destroy. So the what you do not do is you do not destroy or oppress the alien. So for example, if you as insiders, you have a rule that says, I can't steal your donkey, right? So when a foreigner comes in, if we don't have any rules about the foreigner, I might think, well, I can steal the foreigner's donkey. I might steal your donkey, but I'm going to steal the foreigner's donkey because he's not one of us. So this verse is to address that very thing. So all the rules that you have for yourself, they apply to this outsider as well. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen, equal status. You are the same. There is no difference in how you treat this person than how you would treat any of the insiders. So the word citizen is esrak, and it's one born among you. When I've discussed this with other groups, one of the questions is, well, what would this really be like when this was being written? It's obviously, they don't have a passport. It amounts to treatment. It amounts to status. And if you imagine a small village where everybody knows everybody else, and then an outsider moves in, and everybody's suspicious of or keeps that person on the outside. This rule addresses that. The outsider moves in, they're the same as you. They have the same rights, the same privileges as you, and you are not to oppress or destroy them. So that's what you do. You shall love the alien as yourself. So this is extraordinary. This is not just citizenship rights. This is the word ahab, beloved. It's the same word that is used consistently in the Old Testament for the human love of God. This is a powerful verb, a powerful commandment. You have to love this alien as much as you love yourself. This is the why. Because you know what that's like. You've been aliens, you know what that is. And who saved you? I did. I'm the Lord your God. And what's powerful in this passage is both the unpronounceable name of God, which in Hebrew, they would just say Lord, Adonai, and the word Elohim, the plural form of the word God, are at the end of this passage. It is signed, sealed, stamped. This is official stuff. Every T is crossed, every I is dotted, right? This is from God. You know who, you know what, you know why, and you know who's enforcing this. The Jeremiah passage, and I wish I had as good a brain as I ought to have to tell you this exact verse. But the Jeremiah passage contains an if-then clause. Basically, it says, if you do this, if you welcome the alien and treat them as well as you would treat yourself, then I will be your God. The implication of which is, and if you don't, we're not friends. That God's rule here is pointed and enforced. Basically, the sense of the people of Israel about why they get thrown out, this sin of inhospitality, of oppressing the weak people and the widows, the orphans, the strangers. This is why they were conquered in their minds. This is their understanding of it. So anyone out there, is this bringing up passages you are aware of, or can you think of other places where this is powerfully represented, either Old Testament or New Testament?
Martha, while we're waiting to see if other participants have anything, one passage or one book that comes to my mind particularly is Luke's Gospel. It seems to me, it's often pointed out that in Luke's Gospel, there are so many stories about the excluded that Jesus includes.
Absolutely. Luke is almost a story of collections. Jesus goes and gets women, and then he goes and gets outsider women, and he gets people with mental illness, people with demons, people with injury, people with leprosy. He goes out and gets them and pulls them in. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the whole book is a testimony to that. And of course, Paul's language, when he's talking to Gentiles, he's always talking about, yeah, you know what it means to be an alien, and his passage, you're no longer, you were strangers, you were the outsiders, and now you've been pulled in. You're his language of adoption, his language of you're no longer strangers. Paul has read these passages. He does not invoke those words like lightly. So yeah. I don't want to wait too long, but if anybody wants to add any.
We don't have any other participants noting anything. Again,
that's okay, but here's some that I found, and certainly as you go looking for them, there's plenty of others. Especially when you think of all these stories, story after story after story. And as you say, if you watch Jesus at all, you see what he's doing is he's going to, what is Zacchaeus but an outsider? What is Levi but an outsider? What are Peter and Andrew? They're the low guys on the totem pole. This is our book. This is what we have.
We have a couple of comments.
Mm-hmm.
One is in a very different context, perhaps the ultimate, you will be with me today in paradise.
Yes. Yes. Who is more outside than the person who is being executed by the state, who is a criminal, who and all we know about this person is that they were being executed by the state. We know nothing about their innocence or guilt, but Jesus pulls him in. Yeah, absolutely. And then Luke 10:25, who is my neighbor? Jesus invoking that word neighbor and broadening the definition of it to include the person that, ordinarily you'd have to take a bath if you touched them. Yeah, these are excellent examples. And I think one of the things, in invoking them is saying, this is the consistent message. This is not an anomaly. It's consistent. Okay, let me see if I can get back to okay, here we go. So what is the work? If we agree on this, that this is what the Bible says, that we are to be inclusive, that we are to be welcoming, and that we are to shut down oppression. We are not allowed under any circumstances to oppress anybody. It's just completely forbidden to us. So what do we do about systems where we're clearly oppressing people? I know that CBF of North Carolina and quite a few good organizations have done a lot with privilege. And it comes up a lot of times in discussing this book. I find it helpful to talk about kind of two categories of privilege. So first of all, to understand that everybody has some element of privilege, right? I am 6 feet tall. So one of my privileges is if I'm in a crowd, I can see and be seen. And I don't have the experience as an adult of not being able to reach things. I have that privilege. I have the privilege of a very healthy body. My body is relatively easy to care for. I wash it and pretty much go. So that's privilege. There's all kinds of elements of privilege, and everybody has some elements of privilege individually. Privilege, the way it works is, if I have it, I don't really see it because it's just my experience. So one of the things I like to share with people, so I have a learning disability, I have ADHD, and I am 56 years old, so I went through my entire school career as a child and a teenager, and no one knew that I had ADHD. There was no diagnosis, and so, and then, you know, most of my adult life, I've just kind of managed it. But people who don't have a learning disability, when they deal with me, they try to help me or solve my issues. And I've loved people's desperate attempts to help me be organized. And so some of the things that people say to me, and all the time, people have said to me, you know what, Martha, what you should do is you should buy a planner, and then your life will be organized. And what I tell them is I have 7 planners, and I don't know where 6 of them are. And the one that I have has 2 weeks from February filled in. That doesn't work for me. The constant message of my life as a kid was, you are so much smarter than your grades reflect. Why aren't you achieving more? And as a kid, I had no answer for that. I don't know what to tell you. I don't feel like doing my homework. So there you go. That's the answer. So privilege is not, it's not mean-spirited. It's not malicious. It's not meant to harm, but it is ignoring information that's in front of you. So one of the things that I think we do to each other is we assign to each other an intentionality that's not there. If you are in a certain place, if you are doing certain things, you have chosen to do those. Nothing has worked on you, nothing's making you do that. You've chosen to do that. So if you are poor, those are choices you've made in your life. And we kind of are like, yeah, I'm sorry, but I mean, it feels to me like you made some choices, and I can't change that for you. So privilege puts us in this position where we have the ability to not see what's going on with someone else. So the other kind of privilege is systemic privilege. And that's the one thing that I think we have the hardest time believing in, that we would have a privilege just by being who we are that makes us blind to other people. One systemic privilege in our culture is male privilege. And one of the ways that you know it's present is to look at our culture. So think of all the movies, all the television shows you've seen where a general or staff sergeant or a coach comes in to a group of men who are soldiers or football players, and he's like, all right, ladies, you a bunch of girls, and well, you put your tutus on, ladies, and let's, because clearly we've got girls here instead of men. That's not one show. That's over and over and over and over and over again. With the message that women breathe in this culture is that there's something wrong with being a woman. There's something contemptuous about being female. And we breathe in this message. We don't have to be told. We breathe it in that there is, for a man to be like a woman, at best, it's a joke. And at worst, it's a thing of tremendous shame and to be avoided at all costs. That's systemic privilege. That's taking one group And no matter what you are inside that group, you're clearly above this other group. In race, the systemic privilege of being white is that white is the default setting. And we've had this, if we're white, we've had this our whole lives. We breathed it in, nobody had to tell us. When we were growing up, if you're an adult listening to this, this is true. When we were growing up, the commercials were white, the stories were mostly white. If there were stories about Black families, they were all Black families, and we weren't expected to watch those shows. And we, there were entertainers or sports heroes, but they were extra. They were not part of our daily life. And most of the people, when I did my doctoral work and did the research with the two different groups, one was a group of white church people and one was a group of Black church people. And the people, almost to a person, the experience of the white people was when they were in their teens, sometime mid to late teens, they began to think about race. It began to raise its consciousness in their lives. And through their adult life, off and on, they've thought about race. The same people from a Black church who identify as African American or Caribbean American, to a person, zero exceptions to this rule, think about race every day, have thought about race every day, all day, their whole lives. It is the constant message of their lives. Be careful, be safe, don't say something that's going to get you killed, don't break rules, keep your head low, just do your work and keep your head down, and maybe they won't kill you. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that that's what they think about every single day. That's privilege. And it's not a small thing. It's a big thing. It's part of what we live with every single day. And one of the main elements of it is we as white people get to think of ourselves as individuals, right? I'm Martha. And so I make decisions for Martha, and anything Martha does, I'm responsible for. But I'm not responsible for anybody else, just Martha. And every other race represents their whole race. Every other person, a person who identifies as Black, now Black people are like that. If one Black person does it, then Black people like rap, Black people dance, Black people play basketball, which observably is not true. And yet it's that's part of how this works, is we kind of believe it, and we don't question it. We don't think about it. So we're talking about systems. We're talking about things that are beyond ourselves, things that are beyond our control. The first thing to do, if we want to turn our eyes to dealing with systems, is to acknowledge them, to believe that we are part of systems, that we aren't just individuals, to own what white people have done in our name, to own the advantages that we've been given, and to believe our Black brothers and sisters when they tell us we're cheating, we're getting an advantage that they're not getting, and they're being held to the same standard as us, but we're doing it with an advantage. So, for example, standardized testing. We've known for more than 20 years that standardized testing is skewed for white students. We've done that. We've not addressed it. So the SAT is still skewed for white students. The ACT is a little bit better because it's subject-based, but not completely better. Even tests like psychological tests are skewed for white participants. And the first job that we have is to at least acknowledge that, to say, okay, yeah, we see that. Redlining, If we live in the South, chances are excellent that there was redlining in our community, that people were denied access to housing because of their race. GI Bill, Black soldiers came back from the war having served the same way as white soldiers, and they did not get the GI Bill. And so their loss of generational wealth means they're not passing it down to their children. So they're still living in rental property. They don't own that generational wealth. So when we go into houses and we're saying, well, we're going to fix up this neighborhood, and these houses now are sold out from under people who have lived there their whole lives and are renters. And because we believe in property so deeply, we don't complain. We let that stand. Educational opportunities, employment, small businesses. Acknowledging that privilege is one of the ways to make those hackles go down. When somebody talks about privilege, if we have done our work to look at truth, which is what our faith calls us to, then we shut down that defensiveness that says, but I didn't do it. I'm getting close on time here, so let me talk about leaders and pastors just for a couple of minutes. So we have a lot of power. Teaching our people about power is something that we can be doing. We can help them understand how power works, how to see it in our systems, how to deal with bullies, how to have responsible confrontations in our church. Let me get to this. Okay, pastors. So what pastors can do is to listen when we're in situations where there are other pastors of color. Let them lead and follow their lead. Let them be in charge. That's something we can do. We can be honest about our own privilege. We can be brave in what we're doing, and we can teach our people to be brave. We can teach our people about having responsible confrontations. We can teach our people to talk about difficult subjects. We can bring them up regularly so that there's some normalcy to talking about difficult things. And so that we remove that privilege from our people of, we don't have to talk about that. We can say, well, we're going to talk about it. That's the bravery that we have to have as pastors, is that we insist. We don't have to decide a way. You don't have to go my way, but we are going to talk about it. And when difficult things happen, or when difficult subjects come up, we're going to talk about them, and we're going to talk face to face, and we're not going to do it on emails, and we're not going to be passive aggressive. Laying down those rules and abiding by them ourselves goes a long way to teaching our people how to do this everywhere in their lives. The other thing we can do is we can fight false dichotomies. It is not true that getting justice for people who have been oppressed means we have to hurt other people. That is not true. Getting fair wages does not mean our economy will fail. Black Lives Matter does not mean blue lives don't matter. These are false dichotomies, and we can fight. We have a pulpit, and we can fight these false dichotomies, and we can let people know this is not how that works. And we can do it all the time, regularly. And when things like Black Lives Matter rise in our culture, we can listen and calm the fears of our people. This picture, I took this picture in Ferguson, Missouri. This is a picture of an artist made this kind of memorial at the site of where Michael Brown, where his body lay. After he was shot, his body lay there for 4.5 hours. Going to places like that, believing people when they talk about these injustices, and calling bravely for people to acknowledge that the reason we talk about Black Lives Matter is that they haven't. And that's on us as a culture. Calming the anger and the fears is really important. And finally, why are we doing it? Because there is another side to this. If we acknowledge our sins, this is what our faith gives us. If we acknowledge our sins and repent of them, we get forgiveness and we can go forward. And there's joy in that. There's joy in bravery. There's joy in working towards justice, and helping our people access that genuine joy is part of our job. So I think we're at 11:40. I've got 11:46.
We're doing really well on time, Martha, and our
Okay.
participants, if you all would like to ask a question or make a comment, then again, at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box, and you can enter something there. In the meantime, Martha, you just mentioned going to Ferguson, Missouri. Can you tell us, like, a little bit of your pilgrimage? Like, how did you get from not doing those kind of things to doing those kind of things?
Well, that one, that one came as a result. I went in 2015. I went to Peace Camp with the Baptist Peace Fellowship of North America. Bautistas por la Paz has a peace camp every year, and so I went that year. And while I was there was a call for people to go to Ferguson, and I did not want to go to Ferguson at all. But I kept feeling, I get these things that I think all of us who, if you submit yourself to the will of God, then this is what happens. You get called to something, and it kept poking at me. And so I did that thing where I told my friend LaDane Pulaski, who was the ED at the time, I was like, well, if you can't get anybody else, you let me know and I'll go to Ferguson. And she said, just go, just sign up and go. So what the Baptist Peace Fellowship was doing was participating in a Moral Monday event there in Ferguson. So I went with the contingent from the Baptist Peace Fellowship. We got a week's worth of training from the people there on the ground in the Black Lives Matter movement there in Ferguson. A lot of that training is reflected in the book. One part of which is, if you're a white person, it's time to shut up. Talk to your own people, but when you're in the room with Black and brown people, it's time for you to be quiet and listen and just do what you hear them asking you to do. We got other trainings, and then on Monday we participated in this Moral Monday movement where we marched through St. Louis to the federal building. And basically this was a clergy march, along with the Black Lives Matter movement. And what we were asking for from the federal government was to intervene. St. Louis's system was incredibly broken. 90 different little police stations in the area with no central monitoring meant just corruption and corruption and corruption and corruption, and all of these horrors that were happening to people. And so I won't say that it was a direct result of that, because I don't know. I think it was a direct result of the continued work of the Black Lives Matter movement there in St. Louis and Ferguson, that the federal government did intervene there in St. Louis. But that day, they had asked for people who were willing to be arrested. So my partner and I agreed to be arrested. And so we were arrested there on the steps of the federal government building. And it, you know, is a misdemeanor. It basically, I was charged with blocking a doorway, which again, it's funny because individually, I was not blocking a doorway. I was sitting on the sidewalk where several hours later, when I sat down there, I was not arrested. But it was a watershed moment for me. I had never planned to be intentionally arrested, and it's not something I recommend in terms of fun and entertaining activities. But it did open up for me that I had been sliding by and getting away with not caring enough, not acting, letting things happen, and pretending like there was nothing I could do, when in fact there was something very, very important I could do. It was important for me to be arrested that day because the other people with me, with the group, were young and could have lost scholarships and lost jobs, and I wasn't gonna lose my job, and I I really appreciated Gardner-Webb because I was in their program at the time, and they asked me about it when I came back, but no, there were no elements of disapproval that came from them. A lot of questions, but no disapproval, and so it was important for me to have done that. It's not that big of a deal. So many more people have done so much more, but it did say to me, I don't get to get off and not do this stuff.
Thank you for sharing that. You've written this book. You and I were chatting a little bit before going live about there are at least 2 book clubs that are using your book, reading your book, and discussing it. And so if maybe just give us a minute on the book. What else is in the book that you've not been able to cover in an hour-long webinar? And then also you had mentioned the willingness to speak video conference live with a book club. So tell us a little bit more about those things.
Well, you know, part of what I thought I could offer was my experience. I've been an adult working in the world for 34 years now, and part of what I thought would be helpful for people to hear was that I thought I was doing good work. I thought I was one of the good guys, and the increasing evidence of my failure to make any impact, especially in issues of justice in race, I thought it might be something that people would resonate with, because, you know, people who go to church, these are people who are working on their lives. These are, I hate the term good people. I don't think there's 2 kinds of people, good and bad people. But I will say that church people have signed up for, and people of faith in general, have signed up for a life where they're trying to affect good things with their lives. They're working on themselves and actively seeking to do that which they believe is right. And so, you know, I have very few instances where I've seen people maliciously setting out to hurt other people of another race. I didn't grow up with that. I think most of us don't want that. We actively don't want this, but we run up against it and we're like, I don't know what to do. I did this thing and it didn't work, and I did that thing and it didn't work, or they rejected us. So I don't know what else to do. And my sense of writing this book was, maybe if I say, okay, here's what I think is the reason why, number one, why some of these things I was doing wasn't working. And here's what I did that I think it worked. And here's why I think it worked. So that was part of what I was trying, and part of what's included in the book is kind of how I failed, why I think I failed, and what I'm trying to do differently now.
Thank you. We have an attendee who's given us a question for you. A white member of an almost 100% white congregation in the Midwest. We have one newly arrived Black pastor on staff, one of 6 pastors. The person says, I fear that some of our congregation may see and use him as, quote, the voice, unquote, for racial reconciliation issues. The danger, as I see it, the person says, is that the white folk will unintentionally separate themselves from responsibility for ownership and leadership in addressing race-related issues. For that reason, I'm thinking it may be better to use his experience as a resource rather than the primary spokesperson. What are your thoughts as a white spokesperson?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the Obama rule, right? I voted for Obama, therefore I'm done. I did my part. So here's what I've learned is Black people have no responsibility to us to straighten us out on this. This is a job white people need to do with each other, and they're not part of it at all. The only thing I think is important for including Black people is to show them we're doing it, and to part of this book is evidence. I'm making an effort, and I did submit it to some friends who are African American, or one friend who's Caribbean American, because I wanted to say, is this the work we need to be doing? But I think it's brilliant for 100% church, a Caucasian church, to have a Black staff member. I think that's brilliant. I think he bears no responsibility for straightening this out. This is a conversation white people have with each other. And his only responsibility is to be himself. And, putting him in a room where you listen to him, that's important. I think it's a great thing for churches to have someone on the podium, so that if you have guests who are Black, well, now they can see someone who is on the podium and speaking, elevating him, very important. Asking him to be part of this, my opinion is that's not his job.
Well, that's a powerful word. Thank you for your book. Thank you for your leadership in this area and being a model for us, and sharing what you're learning. This is really good for us to give some really thoughtful, and this year we're celebrating 400 years of slavery in the United States. And again, to what you've just said, this isn't their fault. This wasn't what they wanted. Yep. And things like not having the resources of generational wealth to pass on, the GI Bill not receiving that, those kinds of things. We as white people need to be reminded that this is what we who are in power did, and you're calling us out, and I appreciate your doing that.
Well, thank you for the chance to be part of the conversation. I think this is an ongoing conversation, and I think calling each other out is what we're supposed to be doing. I certainly still have run up against myself. So yeah, calling ourselves to courage, and to a sense that you're supposed to be doing something. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. To our participants, thank you for joining us, and go in peace.
Great to be with you.